Hello, this is Cindy Allen. I'm CEO of Trade Force Multiplier, also the host of Simply Trade Cindy's version in association with Global Training Center. I am here with Pete Minto of Baker Tilly. Welcome to the Pete and Cindy Show, version 2. Pete, good to have you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
So lots going on in trade and lots of discussion. So we have to start with the most I think obvious topic. And for those of you just turning in, Pete and I just talk about what's happening in international trade today. No agenda, no formal questions. So Pete, you've been posting a lot on LinkedIn about CAPE and the process. So you have leaned heavily on auditing. So let's hear your thoughts and justifications for why you think that's an important aspect for importers.
Well, can I start off by giving customs some credit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was among the chorus of people who said it's going to melt down. This isn't going to work. Rah, 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 rah. Get off my lawn. And was it challenging? Sure. Were there people who are having a hard time maybe uploading it? Absolutely. But I think given the amount of volume and the number of people who are rushing to get their stuff in there on day 1, minute 1, hour 1, we got to give customs credit. CAPE did what we were told it would do. It continues to do what we were told it would do. And like any system, if you're going to have, you can't just build it so that everyone can go to it at that minute and expect it to be sustainable. I've been pleasantly surprised at the functionality and the resilience of the system so far. I've been really pleasantly surprised again at the reporting, at the speed with which things are going through the system. Never thought that was going to happen. Ever.
Yeah, I think I've said this before, I'm really proud of the team that did that. That's, a large part of the team that I used to lead at CBP. And I'm so proud of the leadership and what they've done. They did a great job. And I liken it to, anytime you turn on a faucet and you have a higher flow, you have to maybe adjust the valves a little bit to make sure that you have a steady flow and the water pressure is not too much for your pipes to handle. So I think, it's kind of a flow meter situation. And when CBP looked at that, they did adjust that up front. So we saw, a few hiccups on the first day, but after that, it's really not been as challenging. Did have earlier or later last week a small outage, but that was more on the reporting side rather than on the processing side. So I've been happily justified because I thought that, I worried, but I thought that it was probably going to handle it the way that CBP planned. And most of the functionality actually was already in ACE. I learned that after the fact. They built this off of the edit checks that they put in place. So they built it off a core functionality that was already there and already rolled out. It was just a matter of beefing that up a little bit and tying it into the reporting tool. So great job. But back to your additional comments on CAPE.
So I'm a big Jimmy Buffett fan, which is usually an indication that someone is a functioning alcoholic, but I don't know if that's the case for me. I got to hang out with Jimmy a lot, by the way. That's one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. Is I got to hang out with Jimmy a lot for a couple of years. But Jimmy's got a song, Margaritaville. Some people will say there's a woman to blame, but it's my own damn fault. Much of what I have seen with issues with CAPE have been the importer's own damn fault. So we'll start with the amount of flow, right? What do you think is going to happen when the entire trade rushes to CAPE like orcs in a Lord of the Ring movie and we're all running towards this thing to upload it? But when I talk to people, one in particular who we both know, when she uploaded everything, she did it, I think, at like 10 o'clock Eastern time. No problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
I heard the same. Massive importers, very large volumes, downloaded several CAPE filings and, no issues.
Next is what I'm getting now. So I am speaking to lots of importers, a bunch of them over since Friday. So I think it's catching up now to the data that's in the system. Pete, so one of them in particular, we're going to end up paying more in tariffs than we would have gotten on our IEPA refunds because we incorrectly stacked tariffs. We didn't apply 301s correctly or at all. And we had 232s that we did just completely wrong. So that is the part that would have been found there. And the second is the improper application of the IEPA numbers for the chapters on 98, then 99. They just kept screwing them up. Yeah, we're going to get to me and the brokers in a bit, right? So we'll talk about that. But whose responsibility is it ultimately that that information is correct? It's not the brokers. It's the importers. The importers, if they would have been auditing these, they would have found that out. If they would have been taking the time to review them, they would have found it out. There's a through line on super compliant importers that I have found. They're ones that audit prior to statement. When I talk to importers that are reviewing their entries and auditing them prior to statement, they tend to be just the most pristine, most compliant clients that I've ever had and a pleasure to work with. All of this could have been discovered long before everything was uploaded. And nearly all of the problems I'm seeing right now with IEPA refunds are the importer's own damn fault.
Yeah, it was funny because if you remember, Brandon Lord in one of his statements talked about the clean data and how the data wasn't as clean as what some thought. He made that statement in one of his filings or one of the, announcements that came out. And I think that people are really understanding why he said that now with the 2 million or so that were rejected, 2 million entries. Some of that was for lack of a clear guideline on how to transmit that information up front when these first came out. So I've worked with, lots of importers that in that first couple of months, they're getting a lot of rejections on those CAPE filings because there wasn't really clear guidance and brokers were trying to file entries and get the shipment out. And they didn't necessarily go back and correct the stacking, or the advice or guidance came out after the fact and no one was going to go back and do a post summary correction just for a stacking order, because why the shipment's gone, it's been paid on an entry, that's an additional cost. And also the one of the things I think is challenging is importers don't always have the visibility to the stacking order that a customs broker actually transmitted. It's printed on a 7501, but that doesn't actually follow the transmission every time. So I think it's a little more challenging, and sometimes I've had to instruct the importers to go back to their broker and get the
Has to
actual
be
data
audited.
transmission records to see how they transmitted it. And then, then you're in a post summary correction situation and, really, really challenging for everyone involved.
But again, whose responsibility was it? It's the
Yeah, ultimately it's the importers. But
and ignorance of the law is
how
no.
do you know always?
Yeah.
I think
So
that's a bigger question.
talking to your broker to ask that question, which is why the broker importer relationship is so important to say, how are you doing this so I can check on it? It's not that I don't trust you. It's that I don't trust myself. It's that I don't trust my responsibility. You are an agent working on my behalf and you are human. And you've spent the past year just under a deluge of sewage every single day coming into work. What fresh hell is this? It's my job to make sure it was done right, not yours. So on that, I give a pass for the most part to brokers. What I don't give one is, well, what we'll talk about later.
Well, what about auditing? You've been a heavy proponent of making sure not just the stacking order is correct, but auditing overall to make sure you have the whole entry is correct.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So when we do it, we audit everything from purchase order through payment. And we're doing that because this is a second bite at the apple, possibly for customs. Maybe, maybe not. We're going to find that out. But now I'm talking to importers who are getting their offsets and they're nasty. They're incorrect for all kinds of reasons. The improper IEPA number being used, the incorrect application of 232 tariffs, country of origin that's being questioned, which is making me wonder, is this somehow hooked up to UFLPA? How would they be able to understand that? I don't know. That's something City could probably find out. Um, the the stuff that's coming back to folks now, they all rushed to it on Monday. They all got excited. They saw they were liquidated. They saw refunds were coming. And then they go to the, God, which report is it? The revenue report.
The refund report, the revenue and refund report.
It's like,
Yeah.
what the hell are you talking about? I owe X dollars on this and X dollars on that. And now you go from being this conquering hero at work to having to go in and say, well, turns out it's not X, it's X minus Y. And that number's not as impressive. It's still impressive. For some companies, it's actually a net negative when it's all said and done. This is all stuff that should be found out before you upload a bunch of information and say, when you hit that attest button, I know what I'm doing and I'm putting it up there. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I think for me, I was less worried about upfront audits, true audits, and a lot of auditors coming in and looking at this data. What I was more worried about was anytime a piece of data goes into CBP system, into ACE, it runs through all the validations and the edit checks. And as the original entries were maybe done before those edit checks were put in place in February, those are new validations. Those are new edit checks. So that information is being run against the edit checks are in the system now versus what was in when you transmitted that entry. So those edit checks, that's what triggers a lot of the 28s or questions or documents required on a normal entry process. So it's going through that normal entry process and going to generate the same type of questions. But I was less worried about massive scale auditing. Everything is stopping because of audits, because CBP just doesn't have that manpower to do that, and they want to save their manpower. They do risk assessments too, and they look at the most risky transactions and spend their time on that, or those where they think they're going to get an offset of money that makes it worth their time. So I think that, they're doing their own risk determinations as well.
Nearly all of our clients chose, we have a number of paths. One of them is we audit everything, every single entry. But the most commonly one that they desire is a sample. So we're going to pull a sample that's in line probably with what the old ISA program wanted. We're going to pick out the outliers, the ones that are just crazy, and take a look at those too. And then if they're all right, what's the big deal? If we find commonality of entries that are wrong across them, we'll just check more. We don't worry about that. I agree with you. Customs not only doesn't have the people, they've got Treasury breathing down their neck saying, we don't want to have to pay additional interest. So how about we get this money out there? If there's a problem, you can always take a look at it later. I'm still not ready to trust that even after you get the money back, that there won't be questions about those, just like drawback.
Yeah, I think there's going to be questions, but I think you're right. I think it's going to be saved for the most egregious things. I think that kind of takes me into, a sideline is audit programs from a software perspective. I think audit programs are something that has really lagged behind the whole software industry. I mean, we have lots of ABI, what I call edit checks. They aren't really auditing software. And I'm seeing lots of companies that are starting to develop real audit programs that can assist an individual like you or like me that can help identify those outliers, looking at those types of anomalies in the shipments. Have you seen that? I
Yeah.
know as a broker, I've experienced, wanting an audit program as part of the process where I didn't have to just have somebody checking off, yep, value's right, this is right, that's right, that's right. And you waste time rather than having them focus on what's really wrong with the entry.
Way I always describe it is auditing versus being a broker, right? Auditing is you need anybody to take a look and say, does A match A, does B match B, does C match C? That's that's not so much. It's more taking an inventory than it is doing an audit. But is the classification correct? Basis appraisement, right? Did you actually look at this when you said it was related party? Did you do any post-entry adjustments to the value? Oh, you claimed USMCA. All right. Well, that's not something I'm going to have a machine do for me. Well, you could, I suppose. There are machines that will do that determination for you and gather all the documents. But for the most part, no. I am old enough to remember seeing Terminator in the theater. I don't trust the machines. I don't know that I ever will, but I am slowly learning that they can be very, very valuable in places where it's a waste of a talented person's time, that we could use those talents in other places.
I really say software is a tool, and I, like you, remember when ABI first came out. And there were yeah, in the 80s, and there were brokers, I remember in Detroit at the time, there were brokers saying, "I will never use a machine. A machine can't do an entry the way I can do an entry. We'll never, be replaced as brokers. These machines are gonna try to do everything." And really it was a transmission of the data that the brokers were putting in, and most of those brokers are no longer in business, because they've been overcome by technology. And I asked a question at NCBFA recently, I said, how many of you can calculate duty doing a deduction of brokerage, duty, and royalty fees? And I think two people in their audience raise their hand because the machines do that, because we don't need to. It's like long scale division. You use your calculator or use your phone, right? You don't trust yourself to do that.
Damn it, Cindy, these kids today never had to rate an invoice. That's
They
what I
never
want.
had to write an invoice. They never had to
Never,
calculate that duty on an
never,
offline entry.
never knew not to use red ink on the damn paperwork. They
Yeah.
never learned. They haven't been through the crucible like we have. I feel so
Yeah.
ancient when I say things like that.
We're the old timers now, Pete. So you have posted a lot on LinkedIn and you got a lot of vitriol thrown your way for some posts you made on broker fees. And I'd love to hear, what your concern was and what your thoughts are and what the feedback was, and if that changed your position at all.
Not at all. No. So here's some of the feed. Here's what happened. I had a very old friend of mine from this industry contact me and say, my broker just called me and said that if I want a CSV file downloaded from their system and through ACE, and then that broker, who is our sole broker, we use no one else, and we've used them for 25 years, they want 10% of the recovery. And they want to get paid in the first 30 days. They're going to bill me, and my terms are 30 days with them up front before I see any of the money. And now this was before I was hearing people who are really getting confident that they're going to get their check in 90 days, which is great news if that really happens. Or it's going to go their ACH. Pardon me. We don't do checks anymore.
No checks.
Yeah.
Again, old school.
And so I said, are they going to audit anything? They said, no. I said, are they going to answer any questions on behalf of the government if they ask any questions? Well, they said yes, but it's going to be at $250 an hour. I'm like, all right. Are they going to compile? I mean, what are they doing? They're just putting together a CSV file. Yeah. I'm like, well, that's an aberration. Like that's awful for 10%. How big's your claim? Oh, it's around $14 million. So they want $1.4 million to put together a CSV file and upload it. Yeah. You can do all that yourself, right? Oh, I know. So I'm calling you because I'm angry. Then I heard about another broker and another broker and another broker and another broker. Now, I haven't changed my position. I'm still angry about it, and I'm going to stay angry about it because I have worked for most of my career. Yes, I've worked for tax firms, but most of my career, I've been the dancing monkey. I've been the chimpanzee with a tie, going up and down on people's on stages all over the world. Your customs house broker is a trusted advisor you're supposed to work with. It helps you to understand your responsibility. They're there for you in the good times. They're there for you in the bad times. And a good one is going to find ways to support you. And that it sucks because we don't make a lot of money doing it. We're not air freight. We're not ocean freight. We're not warehousing. Those guys have ridiculous top lines. We don't. That's just how it is. Right. So then I start hearing from a couple of different types of brokers. The first was a number of, I'll call them boutique, although I don't know how big they are in reality, who said, we give it away. We tell them we're not going to be held responsible for what happens, but you're a trusted client of ours. We'd rather know that you knew that we were here for you when this happened to get back whatever it is you're getting back. Now, to be fair, most of those were for clients that did not have 7-figure refunds, but they were doing the same thing and giving it away. I had other groups of people who were saying, Pete, actually, we do audit everything for that percentage. So again, not big players. We do audit everything for that percentage. I'm like, cool. I'll keep that in mind if I talk to someone who does it for you. And then the overwhelming number of them on my LinkedIn posts, direct messages, phone calls on the weekends, text messages, WhatsApps. Not kidding. Who the F do you think you are? You were there at the biggest freight forwarder in the world when our people were going through hell and we couldn't make any more money on this. They refused to pay more on line items and blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. We'll correct that for the future. But you can't expect me to believe that that kind of money that you're making is, first of all, fair and equitable. Second of all, if there's any value to what you're doing. And then lastly, you're going to be able to look a client in the eye when that money comes in. Oh, and then they're saying, make us the notify party. Money comes to us first, and then we'll pay you out of our fees. I've heard about that for a lot of people too. No, no, no. That's not, if that's all you need is a CSV file. Dear importer, go on YouTube and learn how to make one out of ACE. It'll spit it right out for you, right? and then upload it yourself. If you are that confident in the information, you don't need anyone. Oz never gave nothing to the Tin Man, baby. You don't need anybody. Just go and do it. But for the rest of you that are worried about stacking, that are worried about mistakes, and given what I've been auditing, you ought to be, then if the broker is going to do something like that for you, ask them to add some value. But then ask yourself, do I want the people who did the entry to audit the entry? I would rather have a third party do it or do it myself. Do it yourself. Again, I'm plenty busy. You can do it yourself. You're not going to break my heart, but do it. So yes, I may never get to work in brokerage again. I'm old. That's okay. Words were all secret. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but you know how we are in this industry. It can get pretty surly. And they
Yeah.
saw payday and they ran to it. I think they ought to be ashamed.
I think I differ a little bit with you on some of that. I think the first group of individuals I saw do percentages were all the lawyer fees, all of the lawyer groups that do that. They're like, we can do this for a percentage, and that was before they even knew what it was. And I saw a lot of clients coming after that, and I think that opened the door for a lot of brokers to say, well, if the law firms are doing this and they're getting paid, we should be able to do that. You're going to have your outliers on one extreme or the other. 10% without doing anything seems a little outrageous to me, but doing it for free also seems outrageous to me because it takes time. And you can do it yourself. Yes, you can do it for free for yourself. It's going to take time, manpower. It's going to take, going into ACE, and the broker has to outlay that time and manpower as well. So I'm a big proponent of brokers not doing things for free, because that's how we value our time, is in dollars. And that's true as a consultant or true as a customs broker. And I think many times an importer expects the broker to do something for free because it's included in the price, and that's where I always have an issue. No, my entry fee is just that. It's making an entry. Now, if you want me to check to make sure I did it correctly, that's fine. That's part of the entry fee. But anything after that really I should be able to charge for that, because that's an additional service that I am giving as a customs broker. And there's value to that. There's also value in, okay, here's what it's going to cost just to give you a CSV file, because I'm going to have someone run that report and check it and format it and all of that. And then there's let me double check the entries, make sure that they're correct. We are going to look specifically back at the time frame where there was no guidance, and now there is. So maybe we'll try to look at those time periods as well. And I think that's reasonable. To me, it's the middle ground. That middle ground is reasonable depending on how big you are, what services you offer, what your contract with your importer requires, because you and I both know there's very large importers and they have the most egregious contracts. And I'm talking 150-page contracts to say all the things that you can and cannot do. And if you don't do one of them, then the entry is free for them. And I think that's, it's also on the extreme, but also ridiculous. So I think there's importer importer expectations are out of line with the current market, and there are broker expectations that are out of line with the market. And I think that it'd be good if we can, kind of have a good dialogue and come together. I've known a couple of importers who their trade compliance folks are like, my broker is my biggest asset. And do they make mistakes? Of course they do. They're human, but they catch many more things that I would not be able to catch, and they are my partner. And, partnerships have value. So that's kind of my 2 cents. Are you still allowed on LinkedIn?
No one's ever taken me off LinkedIn. I'm the Kim Kardashian of LinkedIn. The pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So many of those companies have since adjusted down their expected rates. So you talk to people now and they say they want $10,000 up front. These are for pretty big, like
Yeah, large
pretty big
ones.
importers, right? These are for the smaller ones. They want $10 a line. They want $7 a line. When for the entry they charge $3.50 or $5 a line. So and then some of them are asking for a very small percentage on the back end. Again, no audits, no follow up. Don't ask me to contact the government. Blah blah blah. It's still more than I charge to audit everything.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think
don't.
it's just
I can't.
reasonable.
I can't find something here. Now, do I agree with you that it's reasonable for a broker to be paid for the work they do? Oh, inshallah, from your mouth to God's ears. I've sold literally, it's got to be tens of millions at this point of entries in my career. And there were two types of clients, ones that really looked at us like you just described. And they were, again, a joy to work with. And people looked at us like we were a commodity. We did that to ourselves. We
Yep.
did that to ourselves.
Yes, I
So,
think so too. We as an industry, the customs brokerage industry, have underpriced our services egregiously, egregiously.
but why should an importer have to make up for your inability to properly price it now that there's a money grab?
Yeah,
If you're
yeah,
doing something for value, you should determine, everyone knows the price of everything and the value of nothing, right? So you should determine what the value for that work is on a case by case basis. When we first went into the marketplace, we were asking for ridiculous percentages. And it took us maybe a month to say, this is not what's going to happen. No, and I'm talking like back in October, November, right? And then we looked at it, we said, no, here's the amount of work it's really going to take. Most people want sampling. They want a full one, fine. And then I thought to myself, well, what if there are questions? What if things do get bounced back? What if I have to put on a tie, and go to the Reagan building and talk to somebody to try to get someone's money back, right? There's some value that goes to that. And then the corrections that go along with it too. It's different. And there are tons of people out there doing that kind of work. Probably not as good as we are, but whatever. The brokerage community has put themselves in a box where they're seen as transactional. If you're working with a broker that isn't acting that way, then they should be able to charge for the kind of work that they're doing. And
yeah.
we need to see
I
more than
think too.
expectation.
The value, and there are brokers who are just commodity, and you know that, and I think of that Gardner chart that has the four quadrants, and you have your low value, low quality, maybe not quality, but they're seen as economic, they're seen as economy brokers, and then you have the high value, high cost brokers that are sometimes priced out of a market.
I'm raising my hand, Professor. So let's take this
High
one step
value.
further. All the courier companies that I've spoken to are going out and doing the work and getting the money back. And they're going to give it back to their customers. I have yet to hear that anyone is also giving back the interest. So do you think that between, let's say, 3.5% and 5.7% of the recovery is a fair cost for the big companies that all start with letters and end with letters that drop off your packages every day? Is that a fair amount of money? I don't know what
I
they've got to do.
I
I'll
would
be
I would
very
argue yes, because having been at two of those companies, and in charge of their brokerage operations, I would say yes, because they're going to be auditing their own entries. They're their own importer of record. In all of those situations, they're their own importer of record, so they're going to be auditing that information, and if something is kicked back, they're going to have to spend time and figure out why. They aren't going to charge their client for that because their client already got charged for that service. So this is money that they've billed to their client, that their client is now expecting back because the illegality of the collection of the tariffs in the first place. So they're expecting that money back. So they aren't going to charge for that because they're an importer of record, and they have to, in my opinion, this is Cindy Allen's opinion, in my opinion, as a customs broker, they're only an importer of record for those shipments because they're a customs broker, because they were nominated by the carrier who's the nominal consignee. And if the carrier, as the nominal consignee, appoints a customs broker to act on their behalf, that customs broker has to be the importer of record. That's in the regulation. So they have no choice if they are the broker appointed by the carrier. So they're acting as a broker in that regard. And they're going to have to do all the work internally, get it filed, track it, trace it, send it back to the right party. So for me, they aren't charging a fee for that. The interest, I think, is justified in those cases because there's no way for them to recoup costs. I know no one who uses an express courier who's going to agree to pay a fee to get their money back, that they paid to their customs broker, right? So that's just not going to work. So I don't really see that as a in the egregious bucket. To me, that's going to cover their costs, maybe not even cover their costs for actually recouping that money. And I don't think they have a choice. at least FedEx has been sued as a class action lawsuit so from a corporation perspective, they may have to, they're placed in a position where they're going to have to get that money back, because if they do have a finding in a class action lawsuit, they have to be able to pay that money back. And the only way, or the best way for them to do that, is to protect their revenue, which is to get that money back from the government. So I think that's reasonable, actually.
When you're always sarcastic on LinkedIn, people think everything that you put up there is you being I'm talking about me. And when I put up a post that said, "Can anyone tell me if FedEx, UPS, and DHL are giving back the interest too?" And that must have come across like, "Can someone tell me if they're giving?" I was honestly was asking the question. Can someone please tell me? Because I have people asking me and I don't know.
Yeah,
And
I doubt it. That's going to be so hard to track too. And
and
most of it's
calculate.
going to be like cents, 50 cents, 20 cents, because 35% of the volume that comes in express couriers is non-repetitive, which means it's people like you and me who are shipping stuff, or you ordered something and it comes FedEx and UPS, and you might get, if you paid that bill, you might get, maybe you paid $10, $15, and the interest on that is going to be less than $1. So really, when are we going to fight? Is there going to be huge people that are going to fight over the interest? Maybe the court will, but
Well, there's an
maybe the
attorney out
class
there.
action.
Some attorney who's just waiting for the opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, I meant what I said. I give all the credit in the world to them for doing this. It can't be easy, and giving the money back, it just seems like the right kind of thing to do, the stand-up thing to do.
Yeah. I think from a legal perspective, they have no
You
choice
don't have a
either.
choice.
But I don't know. That's just my opinion when I looked at it. That would be my opinion if I was still there, and the licensed broker would be like, we don't have a choice now. Now, for the companies that use them, and the company is the importer of record, they're just like any other broker. They're going to have to go and get their, probably pay a fee, get their money back, whatever.
I wonder if the postal service is gonna do how that would all work out.
Do you know, that question was discussed in a forum that I was a part of, and I think it's going to be extremely difficult because it's not necessarily IEPA duties that were collected. They were postal duties based on IEPA, but they weren't assessed as IEPA duties. So I think that those who use the postal service are kind of SOL in that regard. And those were paid by foreign postal services. So will they really have a interest in suing the US government for that money?
That sounds like a real fun mess to me. I'm glad I'm not doing any of that stuff. That's
I'm glad I'm not in postal service right now.
yeah,
That's true. One last thing before we jump off of here. Amazon. Amazon just announced that they're open for competitors' freight, and open as basically as a freight forwarder for their capacity. They started, and they were pretty clear in their press release that they started this for their own shipments, and then they opened it up to their suppliers that actually use Amazon, and now they're opening up for everyone. What are your thoughts?
yeah. I remember hearing about Amazon for the first time, driving my crappy '86 Ford Thunderbird to a comedy gig, after being at work all day, cutting entries on a typewriter, kids, and
Yep.
thinking to myself, "Well, this seems kind of interesting." And then, but they're never going to be Barnes and Noble. And then it was, "Well, we're going to sell everything." And I was like, "Oh, come on!" Guess what? They sell everything. And then it was, "We're going to sell everything to you, get it to you in a couple of days." I'm like, "Get out of here!" And then the returns will be easy. I think people underestimate Amazon to their own peril. And having known a lot of people that worked there and work there, they really put the effort in to try to get it right up front before they decide they're going to do something. I think there's a lot of people that have done the math, put the work in, and I don't know if they'll be successful or not, but to everyone competing with them, don't take them lightly. Don't take them lightly.
I think it's interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as an economist. If you look at their P&L, and you look at their financial statements, they make most of their money on the data services. So they can afford to not make as much money as logistics companies do if they're run independently. And that's not saying that they don't make money, because they do, but it took them a long time to break even on that. And they were supplemented by the data services. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think they'll undercut pricing? Do you think they'll, worry about turning a profit like the rest of us have to?
When I look at it from the same model that we really emulated at Wayfair, the more volume, the more discount, the higher the profitability on the product being sold. And if you can add more volume to that on stuff that's not your product, then your product free rides on the opportunity for the lower cost. So that might be one of the overreaching, ways of looking at this. I think that where it becomes problematic, there's always a if, yes, then, right? There's always a yes and no with those answers. I think that you're talking about a really difficult market right now. It's the beginning of May. A lot of the ocean contracts still haven't been signed because we don't know what's going on with bunker. The situation in the Straits of Hormuz is going to have a unbelievable effect on air freight because there are parts of Europe that are just going to run out of jet fuel. You start to look at those outside forces that are going to impact cost. Most freight forwarders are going to take what the carrier gives them. When you're your own carrier operating your own leases, it does give you more opportunity there. But I can't imagine that they're just going to take a loss all the time. I mean, that sounds like something a lawyer would get a hold of and say, you can't do that. It's not fair competition. So I don't
Hope
imagine.
so. I hope they price fairly. My thoughts are, are we moving freight forwarding to a gig economy now, even more than what we did before? Because if you look at the delivery services, when I have packages delivered, there's maybe a UPS guy, maybe a FedEx guy, but there's a uni guy, coming up in his own car, and there's some rental, van that I is not labeled. So I'm getting more and more that are these unmarked services and less on the FedEx and UPS, kind of traditional home delivery market. I worry that we're going to move delivery completely to a gig economy away from services. And that's great if you live in a densely populated area where you have available workers and availability to do that. If you live somewhere remote, that it makes it more expensive, I think, for those folks to participate in the economy in the same way.
Agreed. Agreed. Can you imagine a world though where de minimis never went away? The amount of volume that they would have right now to play with, and the cost that's associated with that, the ease of it, the cash flow that goes along with it, how much better off they'd be. Maybe they're hedging for it to come back at some point. I don't know. But again, anyone that thinks that this is a folly, this is the one that's going to take Bezos down. I don't think I'd bet on that. I've got a feeling with that much volume, that kind of infrastructure, the footprint they have around the world, that's a pretty scary thing to have to compete with.
I remember when I was at FedEx, and this was, a while ago. Um, they were they moved their relationship away from Amazon, and everyone said, "Why are you doing that? Are they a competitor?" And I remember what FedEx and then UPS both said at the time was, "We have a 50-year investment in infrastructure. We have, invested in planes and trains and automobiles and the whole thing, and no one can compete with us." Well, I don't hear them saying that anymore. And Amazon was pretty clear. We've spent 25 years building our infrastructure, and now we can compete. So we'll see where it goes. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Amazon bought Whole Foods, which made them the largest refrigerated cold storage network in the country. There's somewhere out there, there's a paper that some kid at MIT did that said Amazon should buy space at the US postal offices around the country and hold inventory there. It would help take the post office out of the red, and it would give them even more opportunity for fast moving stuff that could get it delivered in a day. I am so happy I'm old and I'll die soon and I won't have to worry about all of this because the world is the whole world of forwarding and transportation, robotics, drones, artificial intelligence. It's going to be a whole different industry in 20 years. And either
That's
I'll be
why FedEx bought Kinko's. It wasn't because they wanted a printing business. It's because they wanted a storefront footprint to collect and deliver packages through, especially as they saw the returns being a business model. It wasn't so they could get into that market, it's so that they could have that retail footprint. and make a little bit of money on the printing on the side. And oh, by the way, we now sell shipping cartons and tape and things that you need to ship. And that was really forward thinking, when that was bought almost 20 years ago. So it's kind of the same thing now.
So every month, Cindy, I have a pile of crap I have to send back to wherever, right?
Yes.
And then I collect NFL helmets. I give them out to friends all the time, autographed NFL helmets. So I go to UPS and I drop off all my NFL helmets. And the line for people that are bringing their Amazon stuff back is preposterous at the UPS
Yes.
store. And then there's me with my boxes of helmets going to wherever, Sheboygan, and to send to people. And then I've got my stuff because I order clothes and things for me. And I'm like, no, fatty, that doesn't fit. Put it back in the bag. We're sending that back to Seattle. And I go to Kohl's, where I walk into Kohl's, I hand it to someone, she hits it with a beep, gives me a coupon. If you want anything while you're here. I'm like, I don't, thank you. And out I go. It is so simple. It is so simple now to do reverse logistics that way. Now, I don't know what happens after they take it from me, how they deal with that inventory and what they do to it. I had no
Yeah.
idea, absolutely none. But from the consumer's perspective, it's pretty slick. And the integrators have a part in that. Postal Service has a part in that. They've seen the problem and overcome it. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think the returns on e-commerce is a great indication of that.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, well, it looks like we're out of time. Thanks so much,
Stay on all day.
everyone.
Stay on. I don't know why.
I know. Well, it's time to hit Margaritaville. It's time to
5 o'clock
close up
somewhere.
shop.